Oritech is one of Minecraft's newest technology mods currently available for Minecraft 1.21. It's so new that it's still in beta development, but already cool enough that it's made its way into some mainstream packs like FTB Evolution, Ocean Block 2, and some more mod packs coming soon. With tons of awesome new machines, tools, and systems to tinker around with, this mod gives you all the tools needed to make awesome and insanely OP machines. But most importantly, the animations in this mod are just beautiful. Welcome back to Mod Labs, where we take mods and put them to the test by diving into new features, discovering new tips, tricks, and most importantly, having some fun along the way. In the next 50 minutes, we'll run through all of the different Oritech kinds of machines, processing chains and upgrades, and even some cool intercompatibility with other mods. There's tons of features to explore, so let's get straight into it. Let's start with the basics. Unlike a lot of other mods where you craft a single block and that's pretty much it, most Oritech machines are actually multi-blocks. There are really three categories of blocks that make up most of the machines in Oritech. The first type is the main controller block, which defines the actual machine you're trying to make. However, on its own, it doesn't really do a whole lot. In fact, if you place it and right click, it will show us what we're missing, and that leads us straight into the second type of block for Oritech machines. Machine core blocks are kind of like the filler block, which are general to all machines. However, the amount needed is determined by the type of machine you're trying to make. So for example, the first machine we placed, the Centrifuge, only requires one machine core. A larger machine like this fuel generator requires a whole lot more. Core blocks have multiple tiers, ranging all the way from primitive, which is tier 1, to ultimate, which is tier 7. All machines can be built with any type of core block, of course requiring that you have the correct amount of blocks as specified by that machine. Once a machine is assembled, it will have an overall machine quality, which is determined based on the types of machine cores you used. Increasing the tier of the machine cores increases the overall quality of the machine. That quality number is calculated by taking the average of all the machine core tiers inside the machine. So for something like the Centrifuge, it's pretty simple. We built our first Centrifuge with the primitive tier 1 machine core, so our machine quality, which is shown in the internal UI, is 1. But if we instead use the ultimate machine core, the tier 7, our machine quality goes all the way up to 7. For larger machines, it will take the mathematical average and round down. So in this case, our machine quality is just over 4.7, but it rounds down to 4. Now, one note, because I definitely tried this and it didn't work, cores cannot be shared between multiple machines. So if I try to place two fuel generators right next to each other, the first machine will assemble just fine, but when we go to try to assemble the second machine, it'll show that we're missing those cores in the middle. Now, that machine quality itself does not directly affect machine operation. However, what it does do is determine how many add-ons can be added to a machine. Which means if you don't plan on adding add-ons to a machine, you can use the cheapest cores. But if you're planning on upgrading and adding tons of them, then you'll want to use the highest tier cores. So I guess that leads us to our third type of block, and that's add-ons. Add-ons are basically Oritech's versions of upgrades, which are attached to machines to upgrade the machine in a variety of different ways. Oritech adds a bunch of add-ons, which you can see behind me, and most of these we'll cover later in the video. However, two of note are the speed add-on, which increases machine speed at the cost of extra energy, and the efficiency add-on, which improves efficiency by lowering power consumption. These add-ons must be attached by using these blue plug slots on any machine. However, you can also check the machine's UI for an add-on page that shows exactly what openings are available. The add-ons also have little lights on them that serve as indicators if they're enabled or not. So by default, they're pink, but when you place them on a machine, they'll turn blue if activated. So for this Centrifuge, we have two available add-on slots, so I'll give it a speed upgrade and an efficiency upgrade. And now when we go inside the UI, we'll see our processing speed has increased to 111%, and we now have an energy efficiency of 105%. But hey, we spec'd this bad boy out with a maxed out quality of 7, so only 2 add-ons seems pretty weak. But we're also out of blue ports, so what do? That's where we can use a new block called the Machine Extender. This is basically an add-on splitter that you can attach to an add-on slot to take one add-on port and extend it out to every face of the block. This is where that machine quality comes into play. The machine quality number actually defines the number of layers of extenders you can have. So with a maxed out quality of 7, we can place an additional 7 extenders before our extenders will no longer be active, which is shown with the same pink and blue light system as the add-ons. This is a layer system, which means we can extend the add-on slots on both sides of the machine the full 7 blocks, and you can go in any direction you want. You can even expand them out vertically as long as you stay within that radius distance set by your machine quality. This is where Oritech machines can get a little crazy. For example, on this fuel generator, which only had a machine quality of 4, I placed a whole bunch of extenders and placed speed add-ons pretty much wherever I could. And I was already able to get the processing speed up to 2,621%. And I didn't even place any extenders or add-ons on the other side of the machine where I still have tons of available slots. I know that these machines can get insanely out of hand, and there are probably some really awesome combos that you can make that are not only quick and efficient, but also completely max out other stats like byproducts or yield. I would love to see your insane creations and what kinds of numbers you guys can get up to. Feel free to join my community Discord and share screenshots or talk with other modded Minecraft players to figure out what some of the best configurations may be. Oritech has been carefully designed with simplicity and performance in mind. So that means unlike other mods that have tons of variations of different tiers and types of pipes, Oritech usually only has one tier of pipe per type, which there are 3 of. One for energy, one for items, and one for fluids. Let's start with the easiest of the 3, the energy pipes. Energy pipes are the most simple because when you place them down, they will automatically input or export power based on the port connection to the machine. The energy pipes use RF and FE, which is basically the power standard for most mods and modpacks at this point. This means that while they can be used for Oritech machines, you could also use them for any other machine that also uses RF or FE from other mods. The cables transfer up to 10,000 RF per tick by default, which is pretty solid for most machines. However, the energy pipes do have one of the only variant versions in the game, which is called the superconductor. The superconductor transfers up to 4 million RF per tick, but of course comes at a much more expensive cost, requiring the assembler, which is one of the Oritech machines we'll look at later. The superconductor pipe does not attach to normal energy pipes, which means that if you need to use them for a connection, you'll have to either replace or set up a full end-to-end connection between the inputs and outputs. The cables also have an internal buffer that matches their transfer rate at each machine connection. So for example, 10,000 RF for the basic energy pipes. However, that's not a whole lot, so that's where Oritech energy storage blocks come into place. The basic option is the portable energy storage block, which stores an extra 1 million RF by default. The storage blocks have a couple different ports on them visually. The most important is the single red port, which is the only face that allows you to export power. The rest of the sides, the green ports as well as the 2 upgrade ports, allow energy input. This means even if you set an energy pipe to try and export from a green port, nothing will happen. Now, these portable energy storages do have add-on slots, which means that you can use add-ons like the energy capacitor to increase storage capacity. Even with just one capacitor add-on, you can see the power storage already goes from 1 million to 3 million. If you're looking to store a whole bunch of power, there is another item added which is called the large energy storage block. Unlike the portable storage block, in order to function, this cell does require 3 machine cores. But the base energy storage is already a whopping 20 million RF. And of course, because all the machine cores and available add-on slots, you can add tons of upgrades to increase this even further. In this case, I chained a bunch of capacitor add-ons, and you can see that I was already able to get up to 62 million RF. That's a pretty nice upgrade. However, even with all those add-ons, I still have tons of available slots, so you could definitely make this number a lot larger. I would definitely be interested to see what monstrosities of add-ons you guys can work out with the large energy storage and how much power capacity you're able to get up to in a single machine. There actually is technically one more way to transfer energy, and that's wirelessly using Enderic lasers. But these have a little bit more specific of a use case, so we'll cover that later. Moving on to item pipes. Now, unlike the energy pipes, both item and fluid pipes will automatically connect to any inventory when placed and by default are set to input. In order to get pipes to export from an inventory, you need to right-click the connection spot, which will visually show a connector letting you know that it's set to extract. A simple example of this, so you'll see we have some diamonds in here and we have a couple export slots. So when I set this to export, nothing happens because there's no valid input slots. But if I change one of these chests to input, it will move the diamonds over here. When pipes are extracting items or fluids, they will be placed into the closest available inventory. So you'll see if we have our diamonds in here and we try to export, the diamonds will go to the closest inventory over here, and none of them will be sent over here. Now, let's say we have an inventory full of multiple items, in this case diamonds and cobblestone, and we only want the cobblestone to go in this chest and the diamonds to go in this chest. And that's where the item filter comes into place. The item filter replaces the pipe at the input connection of the inventory that you want the filtered items to go. Now, when you right click on the item filter, you get a great UI which has a bunch of options on what filters you would like to set. It has up to 12 item slots for 12 different types of items, as well as a couple different modes. There's a whitelist mode active by default, which only allows items in the item list to pass through the filter. Or alternatively, a blacklist mode that allows all items to pass through except for those in the item list. There are also two other settings for NBT data and component data if you want the item filter to require NBT or component data to match exactly or not. So for this simple example, I'll set one filter to whitelist diamonds and the other to whitelist cobblestone. Now when I set the pipes to export them from our first chest, you'll see that the diamonds go to the first chest correctly, and the cobblestone correctly goes to the second chest. That was easy. Fluid pipes work pretty much the same way that item pipes work, in that by default when placed they are set to input, but when you right click a connection it will change to export mode and start moving around fluid at a pretty decent pace. While each of these pipes honestly have pretty good transfer rates on their own, there are definitely situations that may arise when you need to make them move a little bit faster. That's where an item called the pipe booster comes into play. The pipe booster attaches to the connection point that you want to speed up and has a nice little glass cube that shows which pipe it's targeting. The pipe booster does require power, but when active it will greatly boost extraction speeds. For item pipes, it will pull up to a full stack per tick, and for fluid pipes, it can move up to 40 buckets per tick. If for some reason even that isn't good enough, then you can of course have multiple pipe connections exporting from a single inventory and put boosters on each connection. Both item and fluid pipes do have a transfer range of 256 blocks, which means if you're trying to transfer something farther than 256 blocks, you need to have a buffer inventory somewhere in between. Luckily, there is a better way to move items or fluids long distances without having to run slightly ugly pipes across your world. Sorry, pipes. And that's with the drone port. Drone ports allow you to move things pretty much wherever you want with the cost of energy. First, you'll need to place a takeoff port and a landing port. You can bind these two ports together using an item called the target designator. To do this, you shift right click the target block and give the target designator back to the takeoff port to save the destination. Ports must be placed at least 50 blocks away from each other, but they can be placed infinitely far away as long as both sides are chunk loaded in order for them to work. You can do chunk loading pretty easily with a bunch of other mods that add chunk loader items, or even something like FTB chunks. So let's try this out with some diamonds. We'll put a stack of diamonds into the first port here, and this happy little drone friend will take the diamonds and fly off into the sunset. Or, I guess, factory ceiling. Then if we head over to our target port, we'll eventually see our happy little guy head on back and land to drop off the diamonds. A drone port can send items or fluids to one specific target port. However, a port can receive materials from any number of ports. That being said, if you're sending tons of items to a specific port, you might get into a little bit of a traffic jam. The good news about the ports is that the time to deliver materials is the same regardless of distance, at right around 30 seconds. But the energy cost increases with respect to distance. If you want to get fancy, you can use this equation to calculate the energy cost per operation based on the distance. Previously, I mentioned you can transfer both items and fluids with drone ports. Transferring items is pretty straightforward, but if we wanted to transfer fluids by drone, we can try to input some water into the port, but you'll notice that there's no internal tank to store the water. This is because we need to add a fluid add-on to one of the add-on ports. Once we do that, there'll now be a fluid tank inside the port UI, allowing it to store and transmit fluids. Now, when I connected the pipe, I actually put it in the wrong spot, which was totally intentional, so that I can mention that to input either items or fluids with pipes, you actually have to connect them to these little orange ports on all 4 sides. Once we move our pipe, now we'll see that the internal tank will fill up with water. Now it's full of water, it has power, but nothing is happening. And that's because although our drone friend is hydrated and ready to go, the target port we set previously doesn't have space to store the incoming fluids, so he won't leave until he knows he has a place to drop his contents off. So once I go to our target port and place a fluid add-on there, we'll see the drone will take off and deliver the water to the target port. You can see that because we actually had the internal tank full, the drone transferred the entire 128 buckets of water all in one operation. Guess he was a pretty thirsty boy. At its surface, all these logistic items seem pretty straightforward and simple, but given the versatility and simplicity, it allows you to make some pretty crazy setups that can handle basically whatever contraption you're trying to create. Now that we can generate and move power, transfer items and fluids basically wherever we want, I guess we need a reason to do that. And that's where Oritech really starts to shine. Oritech has a great selection of machines that not only helps provide better ways to collect and process materials, but also features an internal progression system that helps push you to upgrade your machines in order to craft bigger, better, and more complex things. The first machine we'll look at is the Pulverizer. As mentioned previously, most Oritech machines require machine cores, however, the Pulverizer is a rare exception. Although it requires no machine cores, it does still have a spot for add-ons and a machine quality of 2. With no machine cores, there's no way to change that machine quality, but at least you get a couple add-ons if needed. If it's not obvious, the Pulverizer is a pretty simple block, aimed to be one of the first Oritech machines that you make. Its main goal is to allow crushing of ores to make raw ores or ingots to make dust. Additionally, the Pulverizer allows you to make 2 very key Oritech items. The first is biomass, which we mentioned earlier and is used by the biomass power generator. And the second is Enderic compound, which is a very important crafting ingredient required for later Oritech items and machines. As with any of the Oritech machines, many mod packs may add additional recipes or uses for the Pulverizer. But unfortunately for the Pulverizer, its main use is to serve as a gateway to our next Oritech machine. The Fragment Forge is kind of like an upgraded version of the Pulverizer. Unlike its predecessor, it does require multiple machine cores. But of course, as a nice trade-off, it also provides many more add-on ports, which means you have lots of room to upgrade and go crazy with add-ons if you achieve a high enough machine quality. While the Fragment Forge has many similar processing recipes as the Pulverizer, a key difference is that, as alluded to by its name, it has the ability to fragment ores and raw ores. This means that it not only gives the primary output, but also has a chance to give a secondary output as well. So in the example of something like copper ore, which in the Pulverizer would only give raw copper, the Fragment Forge not only gives 2 raw copper, but also a secondary output of raw gold. With add-ons, you can not only boost the speed and efficiency of the Fragment Forge, but you could also use something like the Machine Yield add-on to boost the chance and quantity of the additional byproducts per operation. One of the key byproducts which will be required is fluxite, which up to this point can only be obtained with the Fragment Forge by fragmenting platinum ore or raw platinum. Now, crushing ores into raw materials and dusts is great for being more efficient with our resources, but most mods and recipes require ingots, and unfortunately the Pulverizer and Fragment Forge won't be much help there. And if you know me, I'm not the most patient, so a vanilla Minecraft furnace simply will not do. That's where Oritech adds the powered furnace. The powered furnace does require a single machine core and gives you 1 add-on slot on the bottom. The powered furnace is basically the exact same as a Minecraft furnace, except instead of using solid fuel like coal, it uses power to smelt items. With this single machine core requirement, you are able to get to the max 7 machine quality, and the add-on slots at the bottom allow you to add a good chunk of add-ons, and with the right combo of speed and efficiency upgrades, it will allow you to make a smeltery that pretty much can insta-smelt any resource without eating too much power. When it comes to alloys, you can technically use the powered furnace to smelt them. However, you'll need to first craft the alloy in dust form before you can smelt that dust into an ingot like this electrum here. Wouldn't it be nice if we had a way to skip the dust step altogether and and just go straight to our alloy ingots? This is where our next machine, the Foundry, comes into play. Similar to how the Fragment Forge was an upgrade to the Pulverizer, the Foundry is an upgrade to the Powered Furnace. While the Foundry does have more machine cores and add-on ports, where it really shines is its ability to create all of the alloys needed to make the endgame Oritech machines. Where before, to make Electrum we needed to first craft the Electrum dust, with the Foundry we can make the Electrum directly by inputting gold and silver ingots into the now 2 input slots after I give it some power, and it will make Electrum ingots right away. However, Oritech also adds some alloys that cannot be crafted in dust form, which means the only way to make the ingot is with the Foundry. An example of this is one of the highest tier resources, Duradium, which is made by alloying platinum and netherite together. Our next machine is the Centrifuge, which is a little bit of an oddball. Its main goal is to separate and transform items. An example of its use on the resource front is its ability to extract ore dust and secondary resources from the ore clumps produced by the Fragment Forge. Additionally, it's required to make some more specific Oritech crafting ingredients like carbon fiber strands, which are made from coal dust. What makes the Centrifuge special is that it's actually our first machine that has the ability to craft not just items, but fluids as well. One of the Centrifuge's most important uses is the ability to make turbo fuel, which was the most efficient fuel we talked about earlier that is used on the fuel generator. By default, the Centrifuge has no space for liquids, so we'll have to attach a fluid add-on in order to enable both input and output fluid capacity. Another important use for the Centrifuge is the first way to make plastic sheets, which does require water as an input and therefore the fluid add-on. Now, I've mentioned that plastic sheets and carbon fiber strands are extremely important, but I certainly don't remember needing those in vanilla Minecraft, so what do we even need those for? The Assembler is basically Oritech's upgraded version of a crafting table. It provides a 2x2 crafting grid that is used to assemble all kinds of items using power. There are some machine components that, while they can be crafted with a normal crafting table, the assembler will have a much more efficient recipe, either not requiring as many resources to craft or by producing a higher number of crafted items. The assembler is also required to craft a number of medium tier Oritech components like superconductors and processing units that cannot be done in a normal crafting table. These recipes are the first that start to require those plastic sheets and carbon fiber strands that we made previously. Additionally, the assembler does not require items to be input in the exact slots as you may see in something like JEI. As long as the correct 4 items are in the 4 slots, it will craft correctly. Because you'll be using this assembler a whole lot, it also has lots of add-on ports that allow you to max it out on speed and efficiency upgrades to produce lots of these medium tier items really quickly. And it has a pretty sick animation while it's running, where you can watch the little assembly arm move around as it's crafting items. Now, we've covered most of what I consider to be the early to mid-game machines that are part of Oritech's progression, but now it's time to get to the end game. And that's where we'll start with the Atomic Forge, which already sounds a little bit ominous. The Atomic Forge is a powerful machine that is required to create the advanced computer chips and components required for the endgame Oritech items, and even has the ability to duplicate ores to help on that resource grind. For instance, one of the endgame items is the Promethean, which can only be crafted using an Atomic Forge and requires a Heisenberg compensator, which also can only be crafted by the Atomic Forge, and lastly requires the Super AI chip, which requires that Duradium that we made in our Foundry earlier. So you're going to be using this Atomic Forge a whole lot. Now, AI is all the craze nowadays, so let's keep with the trends and make a Super AI chip. We'll drop in this Duradium and the advanced computing engines that the recipes told us, and nothing happens. So let's try to give the Atomic Forge some power. Except you'll see that no matter where we try to attach these energy pipes, nothing seems to connect. Remember earlier when I mentioned that Enderic lasers were going to be really important? Well, we made it. Enderic lasers allow you to transfer power wirelessly to the Atomic Forge in order to provide it the power needed to craft items. We'll place down 2 lasers on either side and give them each a machine core to assemble them. Our laser friends have spawned in, but we'll need to use a target designator to give each laser a location in which it should be sending power. And once we do that, the lasers will lock onto the Atomic Forge and give an animation and sound showing that power is being transmitted. Now when we look inside our Atomic Forge, we'll see that our very first Super AI chip has been crafted. The Atomic Forge does not have any add-on slots, but if you want to speed up crafting, you can either add more Enderic lasers to transfer power quicker, or use the add-on ports on the bottom of the Enderic lasers to attach speed or efficiency add-ons to the lasers, which will resultingly upgrade the atomic forge. Enderic lasers aren't just useful for power transfer, but also have some pretty unique resource generation uses. If we instead point an Enderic laser at a budding amethyst, not only will we see that it speeds up the amethyst growth ticks to make the crystals grow extremely fast, but it actually mines any fully grown amethyst crystals in its path and gives you fluxite, which is a much better and renewable way to create fluxite than trying to rely on producing it as a byproduct with platinum that we tried earlier. Be careful with these lasers though, because if you give it the wrong position, it'll mine blocks as far as the eye can see and can do a lot of damage to your base. Let's cut to a quick break while I work on fixing the lab. Welcome to a new segment I'm calling Viewer Corrections. In my last episode of Mod Labs, we covered the Create Post-Production Update 6, which added a whole bunch of crazy, cool, new groundbreaking features. One of these features was the chain conveyor, which allows you to move cardboard boxes and yourself all around your base. I stated that the chain conveyors take no stress units, but shout out to 0x1337 that correctly noted that the chain conveyors actually require 1 stress unit per RPM, which means if they're running at 16 RPM, they take 16 stress units. And at the max speed of 256 RPM, they take 256 stress units, which is still pretty low considering how cool and fun they are. If you haven't already watched my Create Update 6 video, you definitely should go do that. After you finish this one, of course, because it is full of some of the coolest new features and systems we've seen from a Minecraft mod yet. Link in the description. One of the first things you do in Minecraft is punch trees, but man, that hurts your hands after a while. Luckily, Oritech adds a machine that doesn't just save your knuckles, but is faster too. The tree cutter is a single block machine that uses power to cut down trees. The tree cutter is pretty simple, requiring no machine cores, but that also means that it doesn't have slots for add-ons. In fact, the machine itself is pretty plain. However, one side has this massive saw. This side is what faces the tree that you want to cut down. We'll start by hooking up some power, and now if we place a sapling and let it grow in front of the saw, the tree cutter will cut down the entire tree and store its contents inside the machine's internal inventory. The tree cutter still works if you grow the tree first and place the tree cutter directly facing the tree. This means that you could use the cutter to manually cut down and terraform large forests if needed. The tree cutter is a pretty strong boy and will even work on larger trees. In this case, I have a large 2x2 jungle tree, and when we place the cutter down, it'll start from the top and start taking down the tree. However, the tree is large enough that it has brought us to a problem. The small internal inventory of the cutter has filled up and there's no space to store any more logs, so the machine is stuck. Of course, we can use item pipes to pull items out of the cutter automatically and store them in an inventory. And once we do that, the tree cutter will pick up right where it left off and finish the tree. Oritech also adds a group of other blocks and machines that allow you to break, place, and farm other blocks found in the world. If we're following the Minecraft timeline, then the next thing you do after punching trees is go mining. Oritech again adds something that allows you to automate this process, and that's the block destroyer. The block destroyer is a slightly more complex machine and requires 2 machine cores on either side. It uses power to break blocks. However, once we form the machine, we get this note that it's missing a frame. This is where another Oritech block comes into play called the machine frame. The machine frame, when placed, outlines the area that you want the block breaker to start mining blocks. I guess that's pretty important so you don't accidentally destroy your entire world. Here I'll place a square of machine frames around this stone area so we can mine this tasty looking iron and diamonds. Once we finish the frame, we can give the block destroyer some power, and it will spawn a little friend that moves across the frame block by block and starts mining. As it mines, the items received go into the internal inventory of the block destroyer. The block destroyer is pretty slow by default, but luckily the machine uses multiple machine cores and has multiple add-on slots that we can speed it up. First, we'll use some speed add-ons to speed up the mining speed just a little bit. You can also use something called a machine yield add-on, which increases the amount of items we get from each block, similar to how fortune works on a pickaxe. So you'll notice once applied, we get 3 raw iron from that ore instead of the normal one you'd get without fortune. But of course it doesn't affect non-fortunable blocks like cobblestone or andesite. Now that our mining friend has finished the first layer, we notice a problem. The block breaker currently has short little arms and can only mine the blocks directly under the machine frame. We can solve this by using a quarry add-on. We'll replace one of our speed add-ons with this quarry add-on. When active, it will multiply the mining depth by 8, which means with one add-on, the block breaker will break 8 blocks down, with 2, it would mine 64 blocks down, and so on, so on. Right away, we see the block destroyer will start work on the next layer. Similar to the tree cutter, the block destroyer will eventually run into the same problem that once its internal inventory is full, it'll start to skip blocks that it doesn't have space to store the contents if broken. Again, we can just use item pipes to pull these items out and move them to a nice chest. Now it'll continue breaking to its heart's content. After a long mining trip, one might start to get pretty hungry. And hey, the block destroyer can help us there too. On top of using it to mine ores, we can also use the same machine to harvest plants. In this scenario, I'll plant some carrots that we want to grow on some nice farmland. However, our block destroyer is a little dumb right now, and all it knows how to do is break. So it'll break these carrots even though they aren't grown yet, which isn't very helpful. To fix this, we can use a special add-on called the crop filter, which will make our machine a little smarter and skip non-finished crops. Now if we bone meal a couple carrots, we'll see the breaker will harvest the grown carrots and leave behind the others to finish growing. However, once it breaks the grown carrots, our farm is eventually going to be empty. This is where a new block called the block placer can be used. It basically works the opposite as the block destroyer and will place blocks inside a range outlined by machine frames. In this case, we can attach the block placer to the same machine frame we have our breaker set up on. We'll give it some power and give it some carrots, and we'll see a new friend spawn that starts placing carrots on empty farmland. We can automate this process further by outputting carrots harvested by the breaker directly into the placer, so the cycle of carrots will commence. Hey, we have a nice simple automatic farm, but it's slow, and I'm pretty impatient. So let's find a way to speed it up. We can use another block called the Fertilizer. The Fertilizer will speed up growth of crops inside a machine framed area. So again, we can connect this to our same machine frame. Inside there are 2 requirements, power as well as fluids. We can easily power it up with an energy cable, but in order for the fertilizer to work, we also need to give it water. I'll do this with a sink from a different mod which provides infinite water, and pump that water into the fertilizer using fluid cables. Once provided with power and water, the fertilizer will spawn a third friend that moves from block to block and not only hydrates the farmland, but also accelerates crop growth speed similar to bone meal. It's not quite as fast as bone meal, but still a noticeable improvement from just the normal growth. While the fertilizer doesn't require any machine cores to build, it actually does have an add-on slot on the bottom with a machine quality of 1, allowing a small amount of add-ons. The block placer also has an add-on slot at the bottom, but actually has a machine quality of 3, allowing for even more add-ons. Granted, you will need some extenders to take full advantage. Not gonna lie, it is so satisfying watching these farms with all these different mechanical arms flying around doing their jobs. I imagine you can make some pretty cool massive farms with all kinds of different crops and harvesters flying around and making complex foods with other mods like Pam's Harvest Craft. Like I mentioned earlier, one of my absolute favorite features of Oritech is the awesome animations the machines have when being assembled. And hey, I'm slowly getting back into being a YouTuber, so what better way to combine the two than with an Oritech machine tier list? Of course, this tier list will be extremely serious and 100% objective, so if you happen to disagree with any of my rankings, I hate to break it to you, but you're wrong. In classic YouTube fashion, we'll rank each machine from S through F. First up, the Pulverizer. Has no machine cores and no animation. Easy F tier. Next up, the Fragment Forge. Lots of moving pieces, quality sound, and a nice spinning buoy in the middle. We'll give it a solid A tier. The Assembler. Again, pretty nice with a lot of different pieces and of course a moving arm, but it's a little bit smaller, so we'll give it a B tier. The Foundry. Only a couple pieces, but some nice opposing movement. We'll put it in C tier. The Industrial Chiller. Pretty small one and no noises. This one goes straight in the D tier. The Centrifuge. A pretty small one with very few moving parts, but hey, at least it has sound. D tier. Now a nice big one, the Atomic Forge. Lots of different pieces moving in parallel, which could be an S tier, but no sounds, knocks it down to A. The Biogenerator. Some nice symmetry, a couple moving pieces. We'll put that in the C tier. The Bedrock Extractor. This one is our biggest one so far, has a bunch of moving pieces and a bunch of different assembly stages. I mean, man, this thing just keeps going. Plus a little spinny boy right at the end. And that means we have our very first S tier. The Enderic Laser. It's a small one, but it also follows us around after we place it. So our little buddy gets a B tier. The Powered Furnace. Pretty small one, not a whole lot of movement. Fortunately, that means it goes in the D tier. The Big Solar Panel. For such a large multi-block, very little animation. D tier for disappointing. The Steam Engine. Some nice symmetry and a little bit of movement, which puts it right in the C tier. The Basic Generator has no machine cores, therefore no animation, so you know what that means. Right into the F tier. The Lava Generator. A couple nice pieces, but pretty simple. Fortunately, that also leaves it in the D tier. The Fuel Generator. This one's pretty solid. Lots of moving pieces, a couple different assembly stages, and some very nice symmetry. This one gets a solid A tier for me. The Drone Port. For such a large multi-block, there's only a couple moving pieces, but hey, it does have a nice little friend in the middle, so it gets a B tier. The Large Energy Storage. Pretty much just no animation. Makes it our first one with multi-blocks and lands it in the F tier. The Cybernetic Augmentation Chamber. Ooh, this one's real nice. Lots of moving pieces and that little flip at the end. This one goes straight in the S tier, maybe the best one yet. The Augmentation Chamber also has the 3 research stations, which unfortunately have no animations. So you know what that means, all 3 of them are going straight in that F tier. The Placer Block again has no animations, which secures its spot in the F tier. The Destroyer Block has no animation either, so it goes in the F tier. The Fertilizer Block unfortunately has no animation either, so it too goes in the F tier. And last but certainly least, the Tree Cutter has no animation either, even though it has this sick saw, which means we have our final entry in the F tier. The final rankings, 100% definitive. Unfortunately, a lot of F tiers at the end there, but hey, those first couple in the S tier really carry this list. Let's take a look at them one more time and just admire them in all their glory. Oritech doesn't just offer a large amount of technical machines and resource generation items, but also boasts some great tools and armor to help you stay more protected, move quicker, mine faster, and most importantly, do some damage. The first thing to cover is the Exo Armor, which is basically Oritech's upgraded set of armor that is essentially a specialized suit designed to not only provide protection similar to vanilla armor, but is also completely unbreakable. Additionally, each piece also offers some unique benefits. Aside from looking stylish, the helmet provides night vision, the leggings increase your running and flying speed, and the boots grant immunity to all fall damage. The chest plate is a little bit of an outlier and is the only piece of exo armor that has an internal capacity for energy. That's because the chest plate allows you to charge your inventory items, which will be helpful for some of the upcoming items and tools that we'll cover later. While not technically armor, Oritech does offer a couple different jetpack variants. All of them can be used to fly either using energy or turbo fuel. To fill them with energy, any energy storage or charger can be used, but to fill the internal turbo fuel tank, you'll have to use a charger block. Exo jetpack variants are usually faster than their basic counterparts and provide some extra armor protection as well. To offset some of the extra pains of using turbo fuel instead of just straight power, turbo fuel actually allows you to fly even quicker than just by charging with power. Which means, of course, we gotta put it to the test with a race. Not exactly very close. Both basic and exo jetpacks do have an elytra counterpart, which works similarly. However, the jetpack will only be active when the user is flying with the elytra, and the jetpack will provide an upward boost, which means you won't have to use fireworks to fly around. A slightly different way to fly around your world, but definitely can be pretty quick if you have the skills. As mentioned previously, Oritech adds a couple tools that offer an upgraded replacement to vanilla tools that all use power to operate, and as a result are unbreakable. To charge these tools, you can either use the charger block, or this is where that exo chestplate comes into place, allowing charging on the go. First, the hand drill. The hand drill is a tool that functions as kind of a hybrid between a pickaxe and a shovel. It also can be enchanted with the same suite of enchantments that you could normally put on a pickaxe or shovel. The chainsaw is an upgraded version of the Minecraft axe that also can be enchanted. Additionally, it has a tree feller ability, so when you cut down a tree while shifting, it will automatically take down the whole tree instantly, which will definitely save a lot of time. And I mean, it's a chainsaw, come on. Now it's time for the crazy tools. The Promethean pickaxe and battle axe are the highest tier tools in Oritech, but do require that endgame Promethean item that we talked about with the atomic forge. The Promethean battle axe is the upgraded version of the axe that has all the same abilities as the chainsaw, but also does a whole lot more damage, not only in just its attack damage, but also with a 3x3 entity interaction range. The Promethean pickaxe is an advanced and still enchantable tool that functions as an upgraded pick, which features two modes. The first is a Silk Touch mode, which works with Silk Touch even without the enchantment, and the second is an area mode, which allows you to mine a 3x3 block area with just a single operation. You can switch these modes pretty easily just by holding shift and right clicking on the tool. And of course, saving the best for last, the Enderic railgun is probably one of the coolest ranged weapons and has two modes that attacks mobs. When left clicking, a constant energy beam is fired that can be used to laser down mobs. But if you're looking for something a little bit more explosive and dangerous, then you can right click to set off a hit scan large explosion that does a huge amount of damage, but also does take a pretty big chunk of power. As if those tools weren't enough for you, Oritech has one more trick up its sleeve. The Cybernetic Augmentation Chamber is a multi-block machine that allows you to install cybernetic augmentations into your player. These augments are kind of like an advanced skill tree that allows a large array of benefits and abilities such as increasing strength, speed, or even adding abilities like night vision or saturation. When you try to interact with the machine, you'll see it has an extremely large internal power buffer and a couple input slots, but not a whole lot else going on. That's because in order to use the machine, you actually have to walk inside for it to bring up the skill tree menu. Here you'll see a large array of the different benefits and abilities offered. However, you'll notice that they are all grayed out. Each skill must first be researched before it can be activated, and the different skills require a certain research station. There are 3 research stations which are also multi-blocks and attach to the augmentation center using these blue ports that kind of look like add-on ports but are a little different and instead only support the research stations. The first tier is the Cybernetic research station, which will place and fill in with machine cores. Now when we check our skill tree, we'll see a bunch more skills have been unlocked, however they still have not been activated. To do that, you can click on a certain skill to not only see a brief description about what benefit it will provide, but also the required research station, the amount of real life time it'll take to complete the research, the power research cost, which are usually pretty big numbers, hence that very large internal energy storage, and the resource cost. All of these items are a one-time cost required to activate the ability. Once activated, it will remain active at no extra power or item cost until you break the machine or decide to deactivate it. We'll go ahead and begin research, and now we'll see that the skill gets highlighted orange, showing that it's pending. And our cybernetic research station on the side will be in use for the duration of time of the research. Once it completes, that skill will turn green, showing it's been activated, and now our player has that increased 4 attack damage points. Many skills have requirements of unlocking and activating previous skills, so we'll want to be strategic on which skills you put your hard-earned power and items into first. However, from what I've seen, there's no gating to any of the skills, so in theory, if you wanted to unlock absolutely everything on this menu, you could. The second tier research station is the Quantum Research Station, so we'll put that on the back, and the third and final tier is the Arcane Research Station, which we'll put on the side. The specific side you put these stations doesn't really matter as long as you correctly attach the research station to the blue ports. Now that we have all 3 research stations active, on the right you'll see we can have up to 3 skills actively being researched at a time, assuming those skills are spread out between each of the 3 types of stations. The best part of the Cybernetic Augmentation Chamber is that the skills and power or item costs are completely configurable, which means modpacks could change or add new items to help assist with the specific modpack progression, making for a much more streamlined and integrated experience. But even with the default Oritech, there are still some pretty crazy endgame skills like Magnet Mode, Block and Weapon Reach Distance, and Creative Flight. If you've made it this far in the video, then congratulations, you honestly probably have a better attention span than I do. Hopefully by now you can see that Oritech has an insanely large array of awesome machines and mechanics that not only work great on their own, but also offer lots of great opportunity for progression in modpacks. However, so far I've really only covered the basics. Oritech has an extremely cool and complex endgame, including things like the Bedrock Extractor, which can mine imaginary ores from Oritech resource nodes, a nuclear reactor which can generate absolute tons of power, and even particle acceleration crafting, which is a little bit crazy. And because Oritech is still under development, there is even more new awesome features coming soon. All of this endgame stuff is super cool, slightly dangerous, and pretty complex. Enough so that unfortunately I wasn't able to fit it into this episode, unless I took another month and wanted to upload a 2-hour-long video. So if you're interested in seeing a part 2 that covers everything I missed in this episode, plus anything that has changed from when I started this project a couple weeks ago, then definitely let me know in the comments. Additionally, as you may or may not know, this is now only my 2nd video on the main channel, so would love some feedback from you guys on parts that you liked, or even if you have suggestions for new segments or even mods that you'd like to see featured in Mod Labs. I also want to give a special shout out to Re-Earth, who is not only the creator of Oritech, but also helped provide a bunch of information and feedback in collaboration to help make this episode. And as always, I would really appreciate you dropping a like on this video if you enjoyed it, and of course hitting that subscribe button to not only help support my channel, but also show me that there is interest in Mod Labs. I'm very excited to keep this series going and not only be able to feature some amazing new and upcoming mods, but also make them more accessible for new and experienced players alike. That's all for this video, and hey look, I made it just under the 50 minutes that I promised. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.